around. Um, Thank you. And again, or you can go in as a member to utilize our Eventbrite scenario too, which is point and click associated with that. So thank you. So more to come.
Pete, thank you. I expect we'll be hearing all about polar bear for the next couple of weeks. Keep those emails coming. They're very helpful. Wolf.
Quick announcement. First of all, I wanted to thank everybody for bringing the toiletries and writing implements today. We really appreciate it. This is going to be a huge benefit for the girls that we're about to hear about. After the meeting, if you can stay for half an hour, we're going to line up on the bar and sort through all the toiletries, collect them into 2 different bags, one for toiletries, one for writing implements. And then at the end of that, we'll have a lot of donations that we can make to Grave Savings. So thank you.
Great, great. Well, thank you for that. Jeff,
Cool. Great.
let's welcome our sergeant.
Hi. Happy New Year, everyone. I'm going to be quick because I think we're running a little late, and obviously we want to give our.
Just make money. I don't care how bad.
Hey, I was going to do something I never did before, was bypass the fines, but I guess based on the fact that you're here, is Judy still here? Your wife? Okay, I didn't see her here. Anyhow, I have guests today. I'm going to try to go this pretty quick. I have guests today. Dave's wife, Judy, is here. I have a guest of Jill Kranstuber, Sean Becker. Are you right here? Thank you very much. I have, I believe it says Katie from Rotaract. Oh, well, no. I didn't know you weren't a Rotarian anymore. That's why I couldn't put 2 and 2 together there. And I really need help with this, and I apologize. It looks like it says UTKV. Oh, there you go. Okay, great. Thank you. And you're a guest of Ed? Great.
I'm the guest of Kurt Brown.
Kurt Brown. Okay, as we run along here, welcome. Thank you very much for coming. Great. Excellent. Again, as I mentioned, as we went along and Dave wants me to make money, I have a fine. I have one fine today. If you take a look at your tickets that you bought out front, those of you that bought tickets, if it ends in a 7 or a 1, you owe $1. And you just leave it on the table. Master Sergeant. Master Sergeants don't get fined. Okay. We have 2 drawings today. One's for the large pot, which is $431. The second is for a ticket for the golf clubs that you will get automatic. It's valued today. It's valued today at $20. So I'm going to pull this first ticket.
Some of it's lost.
I lost one.
Okay, I got it. Thank you.
I'll just pick that one. Ends in 4625.
Right here.
All right. Would you like the ticket to the golf clubs, or would you like to poll for the big pot? All right. I'll take care of that for you after we're done here. All right. And the next one is 4562. All right, Lou, I'll come back there and let you draw. Thank you all very much. Have a great weekend. Enjoy yourselves. And we'll get to the speaker.
Great, thank you.
I got everything.
You have everything?
I think so. We're good to go.
Great, great. And welcome again for our guests. I think it's, hey, I think it's very special. We've got Ed and Sean here. Thank you guys very much for being here. And we do want to just turn this over to our guests, to our speaker. So Christi, if you wouldn't mind joining me. Christi teaches at Ohio State University, which I just found out. But as Aaron sent out this week, we have a very long academic, she has a very long academic accomplishment. Lou, did you win? Okay. Jeff, do we have a winner? Oh, okay. All right. Dr. Christi Bartman shares her passion for social justice and caring, as you all see in that bio that was sent out this week. Allow me to mention her Air Force service, because we have a very fond relationship with the Air Force services and the veterans here in this club. But she's been working with her leadership. She has founded a number of different parts of solutions for the human trafficking problem and working with and against the human trafficking organizations. She's also started children's trust funds. She also has been commissioned at very many different state levels. And she was chosen as an inaugural fellow for the Foundation of Appalachian Ohioans in 2022. Christi, thank you very much for being here. And we really look forward to your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, everybody. I really appreciate it. And so, well, I don't touch a thing, I just ask you, right? All right. It's always safer that way, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So, hey, folks, I really do appreciate you having me here. Go ahead, next slide. So what we're going to talk about today is what trafficking, I understand you've had some trafficking talks before. So we're going to talk a lot more about what happens here and what it looks like here. But just to get everybody on the same page, let's talk about the definition. So the definition of human trafficking is compelling someone to engage in commercial sex, labor, or services through the use of fraud, force, or coercion. And just a couple of things about that definition that are very important. The first one is commercial sex. So commercial meaning exchanging sex for anything of value. What I'm seeing, unfortunately, and most of the area that I work in are the Appalachian counties of Ohio. And what I am seeing, unfortunately, are family members offering access to a child in exchange for drugs or rent. And so it's called familial trafficking or family controlled trafficking. And we're seeing a great deal more of that. And the trends are showing that not only is that happening in the rural areas, but we're seeing it in some of the metro areas as well. One of the FBI agents out of St. Louis just recently retired and did a big article on what she was seeing in the St. Louis area. And it's familial trafficking is also there. So make sure when you're thinking about trafficking, consider that aspect as well. Next slide. Now, take a look at this slide. Where do you think trafficking occurs mostly? So you've got your Airbnb Verbo, you've got your Sullivan Avenue, you got hotels, you've got the house. What do you think?
House. Hotel.
And all of the above. And and the houses is really one of the ones I want to talk about today. Because when we talk about trafficking, we do think about Sullivan Avenue. I mean, that's particularly sitting where we sit. We think about Sullivan Avenue, and we think about trafficking as someone on the street that's working for a pimp, that's being sex trafficked. But trafficking is so much broader than that. Unfortunately, I've got a friend who was trafficked by her family, by her brother, out of Worthington, Ohio. When she was 12, he'd take her to parties and offer her to older people, older men. And this went on for years. And she ended up being taken from the home. And when she talks today, she'll show you, and this is not her house, but she'll show you pictures of her home. And it looks like, my husband grew up in Worthington off of Stanton Avenue, and it looks just like those homes. You will not recognize it. It's something that is literally hidden in plain sight. So make sure when you think about that, when you think of it. Hotels, we were really excited when we were getting into the hotels and doing the training. It's like, yes, finally. I talked to one of my friends who's works for the sheriff's department, and she said, Christi, I hate to tell you this, but traffickers know the hotels are getting smart about it. They're moving to Airbnbs. And so it's, we're always one step behind. The Hocking Hills area, the cabins, the rentals, we do a lot of training down there. But those are the type of things that we have to make sure we're expanding our thoughts about. Next slide. So this one, I know this is probably not news to you, but this is a headline out of the paper from last year, I believe. that says, you know, hey, heads up, the memorial tournaments coming to town. Make sure you pay attention. What generally happens, and a lot of this, particularly around the Arnold, is one of the bigger ones here. But what happens is individuals will literally bring people into town to be trafficked. Used to be they'd advertise on Backpage, but Backpage got shut down, so they use other means. But they advertise that individuals are for sale. Police do a lot of stings. There, I believe you've met or you've heard about Teresa Flores, who was trafficked up in Detroit, north of Detroit. Sure, her father was a big auto executive. So upper middle class, upper class family. She ended up going to Detroit, moved into the area, Bloomfield Hills, somewhere in that area, new to the space, individual, young man at the high school, talked her into going back to his house. They had sex. He videoed it. He used it to blackmail her, said, hey, I'm going to tell your father, going to embarrass your father, going to get him fired. And for years, they would call her at 2 or 3 o'clock at night. She would sneak out of the house in a very upper class neighborhood, go do what they wanted her to do, come back, and it kept going for years. She founded what's called the SOAP projects. Projects Save Our Adolescents from Prostitution. And so because of when somebody is in this situation, when they're the victim of trafficking, they don't have any control of their time, their phone, their anything. And so what Teresa did was create these little soaps with the human trafficking hotline number on it to put in the bathrooms, because that's one of the only places they could be by themselves. And so Teresa is one of the individuals. She lives close to here, and she's done a great deal for this. But she just, she wants to make sure everybody understands, hey, this just doesn't look like Sullivan Avenue. Next slide. And so these are some of the stings and some of the recent busts that have been in this area. This Central Ohio law enforcement arrest of 93 Johns at area hotels. These hotels were Hilliard, Grove City. I'm sure you've probably had some in Dublin, but what they do is, part of what we're trying to do is end demand. And so what we want to do is, if we stop that, I mean, it's a business cycle. If we're working on the supply, it really helps to end demand, and therefore the supply won't be necessary. And so what they're doing, the AG, the Attorney General, is extremely adamant about ending demand. And so they're doing a ton of stings. And this is not trafficking, but they're attempting to end that demand for this. And so somebody will play a detective will play an undercover online, solicit individuals to come have sex with this underage person, generally a girl, and then they meet them at the hotel and they get arrested. And it happens over and over and over again. And my friend from the Central Ohio Task Force said, Christi, I could do this every day, every single day. That is the level of demand. And so the AG's working hard on trying to do that. You see the other one, the human trafficking sting, rescues victims, nets arrests. A lot of the time, because prostitution is still illegal, or is illegal in Ohio, many times the arrests are not simply the buyers, although we have really upped those penalties. It's arresting the individuals that are being prostituted and victimized as well. And so, but the law enforcement has really gotten good at connecting them with services. And so the goal is to try to help them find housing. Maslow is alive and well here. To find housing, to find food security, to find these other things that they need so that they're not dependent on their trafficker for those things. Next slide. So this is one that's really getting, unfortunately, quite popular here. The one on the left, Columbus man pleads guilty to exploiting over 25 minors with child porn. We're seeing a lot of the online aspects, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that today. So many times that the individuals, particularly the youth, are being groomed or reeled in or tricked online to that somebody connects with them on any online device. It could be could be gaming, it could be Facebook, it could be LinkedIn. I mean, probably not LinkedIn, probably could be Instagram or Snapchat or any of those, and starts to make friends with them. Maybe pretends they're somebody else that they're not. Say they're a 25-year-old woman and they're talking to this 16-year-old guy, and they're saying, hey, come do this, this, and this, and they do. And then they continue to exploit them. We'll talk about that.
Just one quick question. I assume that this is heavily the female population being exploited, but is there a percentage that might be male?
If you national percentages, particularly for sex trafficking, 85% female are the victims generally, and it's kind of flips for the offenders, which are about 85 or more male. It just, that does vary. We do have, particularly with the familial trafficking, the mothers, it's about 60% of them are mothers that are trafficking their kids. So it just depends, and most of that is for drugs. So it just depends on which area you're looking at. Labor's different. This one is this is called a traveler. A California man flew to Ohio for sex with a teen, is sentenced to prison. These are all recent headlines. I didn't have to go very far to pull these up. It happens. You've got a child, they're online, they're talking to somebody, they don't know who the heck they're talking to. They talk them into coming and picking them up. It happens way too frequently. This is one that I really, who knows what sextortion is? Who's heard the terms, familiar with the term sextortion? Okay, a handful of you. And that's not surprising. So what sextortion is, as opposed to online grooming and exploitation to create porn and otherwise, sextortion is somebody finding somebody online. Generally, this is male. They're going after the young men on this one, and it's a financial issue. So what they do is somebody plays a woman or a young girl that gets into a relationship with this guy and says, and they do something online, they do a nude, they do a live stream, something, and then they turn around and say, hey, if you don't pay me $4,000, this goes viral. And unfortunately, up in Cleveland, we had a young 16, 17-year-old athlete, young man, that got caught up into this, was so ashamed, so scared to tell anybody, he ended up committing suicide. And so these are the type of things that if you have kids, if you have your grandkids, talk to them about this kind of stuff. If this happens, please, please, please talk to somebody. Don't just try to take care of yourself. This is not something to be ashamed of. And unfortunately, this is an international crime. A lot of that grooming, particularly the familial, is a very localized, people always think it's stranger danger. That is not the deal here. This is localized, but this is international, and it's a big scheme. The FBI is working it, but I just want you to be aware of it. It's not trafficking, but it's something we really need to be concerned with. Next slide. Okay, so for those of you, this is like the speed brief here. So there's all these things we could talk about in depth, but I just wanted to let you know some of the things that if when you're out there, when you're talking to kids, things to be aware of. Because these are signs, these are some of the signs. For every one of these things up here, I can give you examples that that's not the case. So but it's not a checklist. It's really going to be this gut feeling that you get. But think about if you're seeing somebody that's really scared, submissive, nervous, if you're in the hotel industry and somebody comes in, generally an older guy with a younger girl, and they're looking at the floor, they're scared, they're dressed inappropriately, they come in with video equipment, that type of thing. Pay attention. Has inconsistent story of relationships or where they live. A lot of couch surfing goes on here. A lot of runaways are a huge target. The homeless population, they recruit within the homeless camps, the group homes. The recruiting is like, hey, come, you look like a model. Come model for me. And it goes downhill from there. So those are the type of things to watch for. Doesn't control their identification documents, inappropriately dressed for weather or age, or has like a brand new cell phone, and they can't afford that. A lot of the time, the traffickers start by grooming them. They know that some of these individuals, they don't have everything that some of us have. And honestly, you know what? One of the first things they do is take them to get their nails done. That is a big intro to build that trust. Because when you're grooming for trafficking, it's not a boom, boom, boom kind of thing. It's a longer term thing. You're building trust and then it flips. Inappropriately dressed for the weather in the presence of a controlling male or female, particularly if you have if you're in an industry, let's take a clinic setting. So if you're in a clinic and I come in with a young man and he's got bruises and lacerations and a broken arm, and the nurse looks at him and says, "Hey, you know what happened?" And I jump right in before he can say anything and say, "You know what? He fell out of a tree, boys." And everybody laughs and goes on. And then the nurse tries to talk to him again. You know, does it hurt? What can I do? And I jump right in and I say, "You know what? He's in a lot of pain. We need to get into x-ray. We need to get this done. We need to get his medicine." And so that is a controlling adult, and that's a flag. That's when the person's not allowed to speak for themselves. Signs of physical, mental, emotional abuse, not able to come and go, in possession of burner phones, hotel key cards, things like that. Next slide. So for labor trafficking, let me tell you one, and this is an agricultural one, although I'm going to give you an agricultural example, but labor trafficking happens in all different venues. Restaurants, hotels, particularly like cleaning crews. You know how, and I haven't seen it lately, or in years, but people that go door to door selling books, those type of things. But as an example, up in Lima, Ohio, we have Trillium egg farms, big business. What they were doing was going to Guatemala, finding young men, like 15, 16-year-old boys, to come over here, promising them, "Hey, money, you can live in the US, you get educated, you can send money home, it'll be great." And they took the mortgage on their parents' home, or they took the deed from their parents' home. They brought them over here. They lived in squalor. It was like 14 men in one house without, I can't remember, electricity or plumbing one. They were transported all together. They couldn't go off on their own. They took their documents. They were threatened. They were physically threatened. They were emotionally threatened. They were threatened with deportation. They threatened their families. They paid them a very minimal amount, but they charged them an exorbitant rent on that space where they were living. And so, I mean, literally they hit every single one of these flags in that case. And fortunately, our one of the guys got away and called an uncle, and our team came in and busted that up, and it ended up okay. So that was good. But if Frontline did a big special on that, so there's a whole special on that one out there. Next slide. So this one I want you to be really aware of. Again, it's online grooming. It's not blatant. It's so subtle. If you walk in and your kids or your grandkids shut the computer really quickly, or turn it off, or hit a different screen. I mean, they're smarter. They're better than we do on that. But are smart, get off of it quickly. Wonder why. If they vaguely talk about an older friend, a lot of the time it's going to be an older individual. If their movements are restricted, because people, when they're being groomed, they start to isolate somebody. They start to make them feel like, "Hey, it's just me and you," okay? They receive gifts. They get their nails done. They don't have any money. Think about those things. Starts to act withdrawn or starts to isolate themselves. Definitely. Wants to meet up with their friend or pick them up is a big one. Next slide. So what we're doing as a prevention effort is we are working on a Be Safe, No Safe, Stay Safe campaign. And so what this is, because the survivors that I work with, particularly those familial trafficking survivors, say, if I'd have had a safe person, I could have gotten out, or gotten out earlier anyway. On the flip side, community says, what can I do? And you are probably not going to blatantly be able to see somebody that's trafficked. You may see somebody that's addicted. You may see somebody that's got mental health issues. You may see somebody that has been abused in a relationship, but you may never know that that was trafficking. My familial trafficking survivors, it's sexual assault as a child is the primary correlation in a huge way. And so many times, even child services doesn't identify that as trafficking. It takes a long time. Number one, people don't disclose. Number two, I have counselors tell me I'm embarrassed because it took me 2 years to figure out this person was trafficked. It is not an easy thing. It's really not an easy thing. But what we can do is be that safe person. Be there when you're coaching, when you're at, running scouts, when you're in church, whatever you're doing out there, be that safe person. When somebody needs you, maybe they'll reach out. Know a safe person. Talk to your kids, make sure, or grandkids, make sure they know a safe person. When that sextortion thing happens, they need somebody they can talk to that they trust. Very, very important. One of the trafficking survivors that I work with, unfortunately, one of the only things positive that she remembers about her childhood is her bus driver, because he treated her like a person. He was kind. She's 40 and she still talks about him. That's how important it is to be that person. And even though he didn't rescue, and we try not to use that word anymore, rescue her, she still thinks so kindly of him, so kindly. Next slide. And so how we do this, are you familiar with the coalitions at all? Okay, so we have the Attorney General's office, which handles things at generally law enforcement courts, things like that at a state level. We have the Ohio Governor's Human Trafficking Task Force, which works with the directorates, all the departments. And then we have coalitions that work in different communities because trafficking looks different in different places. And you can see over here in my Meigs County area, you see the white counties there. Half the Appalachian counties don't have an anti-trafficking coalition. And that's one of the primary reasons I formed Eyes Up, so that I could be kind of that middleman and work with other coalitions out there. But what these coalitions do, and you can see that funky purple color around Delaware County there, and then Franklin and all those purple colors. This is the Corsi, Central Ohio Reach and Restore Coalition is where you are, is what you're part of. And they're run out of the Salvation Army, downtown Columbus. They do casework, they do education, they do so many things. And if you ever need to get hold of them or want to ask a question or talk to them, you call into the national hotline, and they'll put you right there with Corsi.
Why is Delaware teal?
Because they have their own, but they're part of Corsi too. So yeah, but Delaware has its own. But so you can see most of these don't do case services, only the ones down in Cincy and Columbus, because they're based out of the Salvation Armies. But the rest are there to, help in those different counties. Next slide. So how can you help? You can learn to recognize the signs. You can be that safe person, which is really key. Alleviate those underlying vulnerabilities. And a lot of, what you're doing with the food pantries and the other projects that you do and the service projects that you do. Thank you for that, because that's going to go a long way. If we can provide those things, then maybe it will keep somebody from having to do these others. This is the 800 number, 888-3737, 888. If you need to call and ask a question, please do. Yes, ma'am.
I was just wondering, in the previous slide, like the Southeast Ohio counties,
Mhm.
that's where I'm from, that we're white. So who helps them if they don't have a coalition?
We have a survivor advocacy outreach program down there that does the bulk of the work, but I'm kind of the one that facilitates a lot of that in those areas right now. And let me do 2 more seconds and then we'll call it, next slide. So Grace Haven, you're making these kits for Grace Haven. They are located here in Central Ohio, although they help around the state. They serve youth. They have housing. Next slide, and it'll show you what they do. They have housing, they have case management, They have community outreach, family engagement and support, mentorships. It's an amazing program, a wonderful program. It really is one of the key youth serving programs in the state. And so we truly, truly appreciate what you're doing there. Yes, ma'am.
First, let us just say thank you very much for your presentation. The work you're doing, I think, on all of our behalf, right, is amazing. But let's take a few minutes for questions. We have 1 minute left and I always.
And I'll stay later after.
Yeah, oh, good. So Dr. Christie's willing to stay, but yeah, let's start with a question.
How did you get involved in this beginning?
I was teaching at Bowling Green State University about 15 years ago, and one of my students wanted to do something on this, and I didn't know the first thing about it. And so but I do know Teresa Fetter, Senator Fetter, and so I called her up, and she was working on the laws at the very beginning of all this. And I said, what do I do? And she put me in touch with the detective, and he came and briefed the students, and I'm like, holy cow, we got to do something. And I've stayed involved since.
Excellent. I have a question about, we all read James Patterson or Jeffrey Archer or any number of authors that, are we getting to the people who are organizing and profiting from the organized human trafficking? Is there a law enforcement?
Oh,
thing that
gosh,
needs
there's
support?
6 human trafficking task force agencies around the state out of the Attorney General's office. They're working nonstop, but it's really hard. It takes so long to build a case, so very long to build a case, and particularly the big ones. The massage parlors, a lot of that is a bigger criminal syndicate that moves the girls around.
There's one here in Powell, Ohio. My beautician was telling me
It's-
yesterday.
Yeah,
They're-
and
yeah.
and some are legit and some are not. I was just with a law enforcement guy yesterday. They busted like 4 in Beaver Creek. And it's, we just have to keep after it. But the financial piece, they're starting to look at the financial piece and how financial institutions can work on those big ones as well.
I know we've got many bankers here and there's some people that would want to know about that. Barb?
I'm sure you're familiar with Freedom a la carte, I'm sure, so yeah, that's what, a lot of us are familiar with. Here, yay for them, yeah, they do good work as well.
Yeah, the Rotary District had a caterer for the last district event. And Barb, do you just want to say the name again loudly?
Freedom a la carte.
Freedom a la carte is the catering company that we've supported multiple times because they actually have job training. And they take the victims of human trafficking and give them responsibility and dignity.
Yeah, they have a little restaurant downtown.
Downtown, they have a little cafe, food's great.
It is.
One of the people that work there is one of the survivors that advises me with Eyes Up. She grew up in Nelsonville. And it's Freedom a la carte. If you can support Freedom a la carte and Grace Haven, there's some really great places in town.
Okay, good. Are there any other questions?
That's not a question, just if you haven't watched it on Netflix, I think it's called Sound of Freedom. Jim Caviezel. Very moving movie on this topic, which is a true story too, with the guy that tried to do this, help out, rescue these women.
It's excellent.
And that's another whole part of this, because what happens in that movie is what happens, but that's not what we see here. So we just have to, remember that there's so many different aspects to trafficking.
And what was the name of the movie again on Netflix?
I think it's
Sound of Freedom. Sound of Freedom.
All right, good. Well, again, thank you for your
Okay.
work and thank you for being.
Thank you, everybody. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Great. We appreciate folks like yourself coming and sharing with us what we need, to have in our community. And Wolf will get us organized after the meeting. And just let me share a closing quote, but before I do, let me remind you that next week we have our district governor coming for Rotary. And it's really, really a nice thing and a very important thing for you to still come next week, because David will be here and we want to make sure that we come with questions about what's happening at the global level, what's happening at national and state level. And also we want to make sure that he knows everything that's happening here in Dublin, because we have an unbelievable active community services team and everything else that's happening here in the club. So I'm looking forward to that. Closing quote came from a lady that has been the running Peace Corps and also United Nations Children's Fund. And she said, in serving the best interests of children, we serve the best interests of all humanity. My name is Carol Bellamy. So with that, have a great week. Thank you for a good meeting, and remember to come next week. Have a good evening.
Bye all.